All right, folks, we're honored to have an absolutely great guest with us, a former oh boy, I'm going to start completely over, sir. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Folks, we're so honored to have a great guest with us, the former ambassador to the Vatican. His name is Francis Rooney. We're going to hear about his great new book called The Global Vatican. Sir, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Brandon. Thank you for having me on your show.
No problem, Mr. Rooney. Let's get right to this incredible book that deals with, global issues and the Catholic Church and really helps give people an incredible insight into the relationship between the United States and the Vatican. And what was the one purpose or goal that kind of helped drove you to write the book?
Well, I found that people, even very serious Catholics, have little understanding of the important role the Holy See has played for over 1,200 years in international affairs and diplomacy, and as distinct from church activities and theology. And also, many people don't realize the kind of complex and interesting relationship that the Holy See's had with the United States and why it's important that we have a diplomatic relationship with them.
And your book really points out, and this is one of the things that I find just shocking. I did not know that we didn't even have full diplomatic relations until Ronald Reagan's administration in 1984. So how on earth did that even happen? How do we go 200 years and not have a relationship like that?
Well, like I tried to lay out in the book, there have been a lot of reasons that two seemingly natural allies would have been apart. We have had a lot of religious prejudice in the United States, especially anti-Catholic prejudice. And for many years, the Holy See was a very monarchical type of organization, and it was very much aligned with European monarchies, and that's what the United States fought a revolution to get away from. So the two entities were kept apart. Several presidents used personal representatives to accomplish specific missions. So I try to describe in the book, like President Roosevelt, President Truman, President Nixon. But it wasn't until Ronald Reagan saw the opportunity to leverage the anti-communist fervor of Pope John Paul that President Reagan saw he could leverage that soft power voice against communism that we established full diplomatic level relationships.
And it's so funny because until I kind of got that, it really raises my appreciation for what President Reagan was able to accomplish by partnering with the Pope at that time. Because by not having that relationship, would we have had the fall of the wall and the end of communism as in modern times knows, and that kind of thing? And that was a remarkable piece of the book that I was totally oblivious to, so I know most people are.
Yeah, I put the quote in the book there from Gorbachev where he said, all that happened in Eastern Europe would have been impossible without the Pope.
It's incredible. It's incredible to know that. And you of course, you became the U.S. ambassador under President Bush, and you really came in really pretentious times in the middle of the whole 9/11, tragedy. So what was it like to be the ambassador during this time with the conflicts in Afghanistan and then, of course, in Iraq?
Well, of course, the Holy See was a little more muted in its opposition to Afghanistan, but certainly they were quite vocal against their opposition to the second Iraq invasion. And as it turns out, they had some very good points to make. Many of their concerns have come true. Not that it meant that we shouldn't have invaded Iraq, but it has inspired the Sunni-Shiite civil war and increased the persecution of Christians. But so when I came in, one of my principal objectives for the administration was to mute criticism of the United States about Iraq, and I worked, hard to do that. Fortunately, we had a new Pope, Pope Benedict XVI, who had not been involved directly in the initial opposition to Iraq, and he was willing to kind of turn the page and, as he told me, work to bring peace and stability to Iraq, and I thought that was a real good sign that we could continue to focus on the other areas where the United States and the Holy See do work together.
And you did really point out a good point. The Catholic Church was right on this. Many religious groups were saying, that the danger in the Middle East is that, what little stability we have is going to be ripped away. And now we're struggling to kind of put the lid back on. And Pope Benedict really did, I think, a really good job of kind of figuring out, a way of balancing that. That's the best way to explain his approach to that?
Yeah, and on the one hand, he said we're going to not criticize the United States directly for the past, but we're also going to criticize radical Islam and the use of religion as an excuse for violence, and push Islam to come into concert with modernity. And we can't just continue to act like it's the 12th century all over again. and nobody's spoken out as bluntly as Pope Benedict did about these issues.
How does your book, or what do you cover, or give you an opportunity to cover how the parallels of their history? I mean, obviously you talk about the United States and the Holy See in two different ways of reaching, democracy, human rights. There's a lot of parallels there, right?
Well, there are. I mean, both the Holy See's diplomacy and the United States foreign policy are founded on very similar fundamental principles. The United States itself was founded on the same principles of trying to protect human dignity and the natural rights of man, and to spread freedom around the world, especially religious freedom.
What I love about books like yours is I'm always exposed to new terminology and things that I wasn't really aware of. Even in the news and doing what we do, you still from time to time don't get some of the jargon or some of the inside thing. And one of those was soft power, and that the Catholic Church, of course, is very, very powerful, but this is a term that is pretty well used. So what is soft power?
Soft power is the influence and power of persuasion instead of coercion. The ability to build a bridge to someone based upon the value of your argument and the moral correctness of your position. And as such, it's a useful element in the array of weapons which can be deployed in diplomacy to try to resolve conflicts and build ties to other countries with whom we may have disagreements.
It was just such a great definition and perspective. I know, going back to debate class and learning how to debate, and there is a certain element of coercion, but also persuasion. And I think you're really tapping on something that almost could be yet another book, to see how the Catholic Church can communicate a message for people to understand or clarify their beliefs. And I think that's what they're trying to accomplish, right?
Yeah, and they're a neutral, well-respected arbiter. They don't have territory or hegemonic agenda, and as such, they can play a role in diplomacy where other secular states may not. I put in the book about Tony Blair turning to the Holy See to help get those British sailors released in 2000, I think 6. I get mixed up, 6 or 7. And here just lately, the southern cone states of South America have called on the Holy See and President Maduro in Venezuela to allow the Holy See to come in and perhaps offer mediation as Venezuela tries to reconcile itself with widespread opposition against a regime that has ruined the country.
Do you think the Catholic Church still has for lack of a term, the moral authority to be that leader? I mean, are they still battling some of the stigmas and stereotypes of their past, or do you think they really still maintain that, moral compass?
I think they maintain the moral compass in the area of diplomacy. I think you've got to recognize that abuse scandals in the Western world have taken a bit of a toll, but those things are not related to diplomacy. They're related to the organization and supervision and conduct of certain bishops. And even in those areas, I think the Holy See has made great strides, many of which were initiated by Pope Benedict when he was still a cardinal as head of the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith, to assure that problems were dealt with expediently and police and civil officials were brought in. But neither here nor there. The role of the Holy See in diplomacy is to try to push these fundamental principles, which are seriously at risk in many areas of the world. You look at the killing that's going on in Sudan, the Lord's Army in Uganda, Central African Republic, the trafficking of people that happens in Asia and Eastern Europe. These are fundamental plagues and scourges which Holy See diplomacy is uniquely qualified to criticize and expose.
Did you have an opportunity to meet Pope John Paul?
No, I really didn't. I went to a midnight mass and was next to him one time, but he was so ill at that point. It was like 2002
right.
or 3.
Okay. When you met Pope Benedict the 16th, what's the most striking thing about him?
I think that his pastoral warmth. When we got over there, there had been a lot of material in the press about his severity and a rigid Germanic approach to things. And when I met him, I thought, wow, this guy is very warm, has a nice sense of humor, made me feel at ease, and I was certainly quite nervous to be meeting a pope. And also has a great respect and affinity for the United States and some of our founding principles.
That's extraordinary. And it's sad that he had he left the way he did, and people look at that in a negative light, which may or may not be fair. But now with Pope Francis, I think that things have, from a PR standpoint, I think have gotten better. I think there are some different messages and things that are very, very well aligned with what I think the United States moral compass is. And I don't see, I've been disappointed, I guess this is a better way to see, President Obama and his administration really embracing that. I mean, he's visited with them one time, right? I mean, has he been there more than once? I think it's only once.
I would say he visited once and a half or once and a quarter.
Yeah.
He went over there and made a very perfunctory visit, more of a social call with his family early on, but there was no agenda, no joint statements, no nothing. And this was really the only official visit that he's made. And at least I'm encouraged that he did this, and I'm encouraged that he let Secretary Kerry go meet with the Pope earlier in the winter, because you're right, he spent over 6 years basically ignoring the role of the Holy See in diplomacy.
And just so many missed opportunities. I mean, so much of this stuff that's going on in the world has religious tie. You mentioned briefly religious persecution of Christians. And what was it, some of the stuff that Pope Benedict would say in his messages, or some of the things that he would do to speak out against Christian persecution? Yeah,
he spoke out all the time. He tried to bring huge visibility to that. They tried to convene in the post-Regensburg wake groups of imams and sometimes Jewish leaders as well, and certainly Catholic leaders to develop programs on interreligious dialogue and trying to build bridges of culture as well as understanding to get some people out there speaking for conciliation. One time as Benedict was giving his World Day of Peace message, I think it was like 2009 or 10, that very day, 1st of January, a whole lot of Coptic Christians were murdered in Alexandria in the cathedral.
And that was really one of the big sparks to what we've seen in Egypt and what become the Arab Spring, folks. I think you and I, we've touched on it on the show before about when we were covering Alexandria back, in 2010 in particular, how that was kind of a hotbed for this persecution. It's spiraling out of control. And we can look back at Pope Benedict's efforts here and the Bush administration transitioning now into the Obama administration and what seemingly seems like some missed opportunities to at least engage this resource. I mean, they're an amicable resource, right, Ambassador Rooney? I mean, I'm not trying to read between the lines here, but that's pretty much one of the things your book really brings to light is they're kind of a partner in this.
Well, they are, if you believe in these fundamental principles that are the words of our preamble to our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence and our Bill of Rights, then they're a natural partner. And you can look in the book at some of the instances of their soft power adding value in the world, and you can say, well, why haven't we been using them during the Arab Spring or as Syria has destabilized? Where's their voice been? Well, they've been speaking up, but the United States hasn't wanted to pay attention to them, and there's only so much they can do without a partner.
Well, and like you said, when a president visits, it puts it on a spotlight. It doesn't get ignored by the press. Everybody talks about what the president's doing. Everybody's talking about what the Pope's doing. You put them in the same room together, now you're talking about a global headline and possibly, hopefully, a global message. And I think that's where your book, I think, is amazing because it really helps kind of shine the light on how important that is based on your experiences, because you were there firsthand working with this to see how influential that partnership can be.
Sure. But I don't think a week went by that either Secretary Rice or President Bush didn't mention religious freedom, which was it was a very important turbocharge to the continued voice of the Holy See in calling for religious freedom and freedom of association and all that in countries where it's a bridge, particularly some countries in Asia.
How many times did you meet with President Bush and the Pope? How many times did he come over and you guys were together?
He came over once, and then there was the time back when the Pope came to the White House in April of 2008. The last time he came, we were back in the United States. We come back.
The Pope came here, yeah. What was the sort of like the I guess the engagement? How was the tone in the room and the way the conversation went between those two incredible leaders?
Well, there was so much symmetry between the President Bush's personal views and the teachings of the Catholic Church, and between the administration's official positions and the diplomacy of the Holy See based on those same principles, that it was a really positive, upbeat atmosphere. The president was very much looking forward to seeing the Pope. They had a long private meeting, and then we had a meeting with him and Secretary Negroponte and me and a few other people. And then we had a long meeting with the Secretary of State of the Vatican. We talked about things going on in 15 different countries where interests of the United States and the Holy See were being deployed or being concerned or were at stake.
The book is called The Global Vatican, and we're talking to Ambassador Francis Rooney and really kind of understanding or trying to highlight the incredible relationship the U.S. and the Holy See have as far as a similar mission when it comes to human rights and democracy and freedom and religious freedom.
And I might mention 179 countries have diplomatic relations with the Holy See, and over 30 of them are Muslim countries. So that's a unique platform to communicate with all important constituents that are tied into the conflicts that we face now.
That's a fascinating topic in and of itself. So how is the let's go down that rabbit hole for a moment. How is the relationship then approached from the Catholic Church to the Muslim countries? Because I mean, you kind of have to. You can press. I mean, I see this. I see this with Pope Francis a little bit, and I see it with some of the major advocates around the world. You push a little, but how do they handle that without pushing too much?
Well, Pope Benedict showed that you can push and that you can be clear. And nobody's spoken as clearly as he did in Regensburg in September of 2006, because it's a strong message that needs to be delivered. And I don't think that political correctness and appeasement are going to get us down the road. I think you can work to build bridges based on intellectual dialogue and cultural relationships and all that, which are very important. And the cultural diplomacy of the State Department ties into the Holy See's soft power. But going aside from that, people need to make the radical people in Islam, and I'm not saying there's a lot of them, I don't know how many there are, but there's enough, realize that the world won't put up with 12th century behavior in the 21st century. Absolutely.
I want to touch on Pope Francis. What has been the one thing that you have been impressed with the most?
I love the fact that he has a new world candor and openness, that he's able to speak and communicate so well and touch so many people, and therefore get the message of the Holy See out to a broader audience than perhaps the more scholarly way that Pope Benedict did.
Yeah. I mean, that really is a great way to sum up just his amazing way to communicate on such a human level. The way he's tackling, poverty and charity, and it's all about just a real life application. And yet, Pope Benedict was so intellectual and just seemed like just such a brilliant man.
Yeah, each one's making the contribution that we seem to need at the time.
Yeah, that's true. Folks, the book is called The Global Vatican. They can check out more at francisrooney.com. We'll have a link to that on our website that you can see at the bottom of this if you're catching this online. And if you're listening live, it's Francis, Francis, Rooney, just like it sounds, .com. You can get that. Now, is the book out now? Can they get it, or they have to pre-order it through Amazon? How do we?
You can get it at Amazon and Barnes & Nobles and different bookstores.
All the outlets have it already.
You bet.
It's fantastic. That's great. Ambassador Rooney, thank you again for fitting us into your busy schedule. And I think I'm going to have a follow-up. We're going to talk some more about some of this, because this is an incredible onion to kind of peel back layers. And as you keep going, like we kind of went down one rabbit hole, you start to discover even more insight into understanding and education for folks to see how much this represents in world affairs. And I think it just kind of gets lost. I guess the best way to say it, at least I think, in my opinion, is it seems like we're trying to put them in the box of a church, and they're much, much bigger than that.
No, they are much bigger. That says it all, and it's a very big subject, and I appreciate the chance to be on your show, Brandon.
Thank you again, Ambassador Rooney, and God bless and take care.
Have a nice day. Thank you.